winding mountain road seemed to go on forever, each turn revealing more mist-shrouded peaks in the distance. Emily gripped the steering wheel tightly, her eyes straining to see through the thickening fog. Beside her, Mark consulted the map on his phone, frowning at the weak signal. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with frustration. Mark nodded, though he looked far from certain. "The GPS says we're close. The hotel should be just around the next bend." As if on cue, a looming shape emerged from the mist. The Overlook Hotel stood perched on the edge of a cliff, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the rugged wilderness surrounding it. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as she pulled into the gravel driveway. The couple had been looking forward to this romantic getaway for months. Both successful professionals in the city, they rarely had time for each other. This secluded mountain retreat seemed like the perfect place to reconnect. As they stepped out of the car, the crisp mountain air filled their lungs. The hotel loomed above them, its windows dark and uninviting. Mark grabbed their bags from the trunk while Emily approached the front entrance. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit lobby. Dust motes danced in the air, visible in the weak light filtering through the grimy windows. At the reception desk, an elderly man with a gaunt face and sunken eyes greeted them with a thin smile. "Welcome to the Overlook Hotel," he said, his voice raspy. "We've been expecting you." Emily and Mark exchanged glances. There was something off about the man's tone, but they brushed it off as fatigue from their long journey. They checked in and made their way to their room on the 3rd floor. The hallway was long and narrow, lined with faded wallpaper and flickering gas lamps. Their footsteps echoed eerily in the silence. Their room was spacious but outdated, with heavy velvet curtains and a 4-poster bed. As Emily unpacked, Mark flipped through a dusty brochure he'd found on the nightstand. "Hey, did you know this place has quite a history?" he said, his eyes scanning the pages. "It says here the hotel was built in the 1800s by a reclusive millionaire." Emily joined him, peering over his shoulder. "Anything interesting?" Mark's brow furrowed. "There's a section here about disappearances, but it's all smudged. I can barely make it out." A knock at the door made them both jump. A maid stood in the hallway, her uniform as outdated as the hotel's decor. "Turn-down service," she mumbled, not meeting their eyes. As she worked, Emily tried to engage her in conversation. "Have you worked here long?" The maid paused, her hands trembling slightly. "Longer than I can remember," she whispered. Before Emily could ask more, the maid hurried out of the room. That night, Emily woke to the sound of whispers. She sat up, her heart racing. The room was pitch black, but she could swear she saw shadows moving in the corners. "Mark," she hissed, shaking her husband awake. "Did you hear that?" Mark rubbed his eyes, groggy. "Hear what?" But the whispers had stopped. Emily lay back down, uneasy. She told herself it was just the wind, but deep down she knew it was something more. The next day they explored the hotel. It seemed strangely empty for a tourist season. The few guests they encountered were oddly pale and quiet, their eyes distant. In the hotel bar, Emily struck up a conversation with the bartender, an old man with gnarled hands. "This place must have some interesting stories," she probed. The bartender's eyes darted nervously. "Aye, that it does, but some stories are best left untold." As he turned away, Emily noticed something strange. In the mirror behind the bar, the bartender cast no reflection. Shaken, Emily found Mark in the library. He was poring over old newspapers, his face pale. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling, "I think I know why this place feels so wrong." He showed her the articles he'd found. Over the past century, dozens of guests had vanished without a trace from the Overlook Hotel. The disappearances always happened in pairs, and always during the off-season. "We need to leave," Emily said, her voice urgent. But as they rushed to their room to pack, they found the door wouldn't open. The whispers returned, louder now, seeming to come from the very walls. They ran down the hallway, but it seemed to stretch endlessly before them. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, reaching out with ghostly hands. They burst into the lobby, but it was transformed. Gone was the quaint, old-fashioned decor. Instead, they found themselves in a grand ballroom, filled with ethereal figures in period dress. The ghostly revelers turned to stare at them, their eyes hollow and hungry. The elderly receptionist appeared before them, his form flickering like a bad television signal. "Welcome to eternity," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "The Overlook has chosen you." Emily and Mark clung to each other as the spectral crowd closed in. They realized with horror that these were the souls of all those who had disappeared over the years, trapped forever in this ghostly hotel. As the phantoms reached for them, Emily and Mark felt a chill seep into their very bones. They knew that soon, they too would become part of the Overlook's dark history, doomed to haunt its halls for eternity. The last thing they saw was the hotel's exterior, shimmering like a mirage before fading back into the mist. To the outside world, it would seem as if they had simply vanished into thin air, another unsolved mystery in the long and tragic history of the Overlook Hotel. And so the hotel waited in its misty mountain perch, ready to welcome its next unsuspecting guests, always hungry for more souls to add to its eternal guest list. The rain fell in sheets, drumming against the windows of David Mercer's small apartment. He sat at his cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of unfinished manuscripts and half-empty coffee cups. The clock on the wall ticked away the hours of another unproductive day. A sharp knock at the door startled David from his brooding. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not on such a miserable evening. Cautiously, he approached the door and opened it. There was no one there. Only a plain brown package sat on his welcome mat, already speckled with raindrops. David picked it up, surprised by its weight. There was no return address, only his name scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. Back inside, David set the package on his desk and stared at it. Something about it made him uneasy, though he couldn't say why. With trembling fingers, he began to unwrap it. Inside was a wooden box, its surface smooth and dark with age. As David lifted the lid, a musty scent wafted out, carrying with it the faintest hint of something familiar. Something he had tried hard to forget. The first item in the box was a small, tarnished key. David's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it. It was the key to his childhood home, the place where his little sister had disappeared 20 years ago. The police had never found her, and the tragedy had torn his family apart. As he held the key, memories flooded back. The sound of his sister's laughter, the frantic search through the woods behind their house, his mother's anguished cries. David's hand shook, and he nearly dropped the key. Beneath it lay a faded photograph. David's heart raced as he picked it up. It showed him and his high school sweetheart, Sarah, standing in front of an old Ferris wheel. This was taken the night before the accident, the night that had left Sarah in a coma she never woke from. David closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the rush of guilt and grief. He had been driving that night, distracted by an argument. The crash had been his fault, a burden he had carried for years. The next item made his blood run cold. It was a small, silver pocket watch. David recognized it instantly. It had belonged to his father. The watch had stopped at exactly 3:17, the moment his father had suffered a fatal heart attack. David had found him, had tried desperately to revive him, but it had been too late. With shaking hands, David set the watch aside. How was this possible? Who could have gathered these items, each linked to the worst moments of his life? At the bottom of the box lay an envelope. David hesitated before opening it, dreading what he might find inside. The letter within was written in the same unfamiliar hand as the address on the package. "Dear David," it began, "I know these items bring back painful memories, but it's time to confront your past. Each object holds a key to healing, if you're brave enough to look deeper." David's mind reeled. Who could know so much about his life, about the tragedies that had shaped him? As he pondered this, he noticed something strange. The key to his childhood home seemed to be glowing faintly. Drawn by an impulse he didn't understand, David picked up the key. The moment his fingers touched it, the world around him blurred. When his vision cleared, he found himself standing in front of his old house. But it wasn't as he remembered it. The paint was fresh, the garden well tended, and there, playing on the front lawn, was his sister. She looked up and smiled at him as if no time had passed at all. "She's safe here," a voice behind him said. David turned to see an old woman, her eyes kind but filled with an ancient wisdom. "This is a place between memory and dream, where lost things can be found." Before David could respond, the scene faded, and he was back in his apartment. The key lay cold and ordinary in his hand, but he could still feel the warmth of that other place. With newfound courage, David picked up the photograph of Sarah. Again, the world shifted. He found himself at the fairground, the night before the accident. Sarah stood before him, beautiful and alive. "You can't change the past," the old woman's voice whispered, "but you can make peace with it. She never blamed you, David. It's time to forgive yourself." Tears streamed down David's face as the fairground faded away. He felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, a burden he had carried for too long. Finally, David reached for his father's pocket watch. This time, he found himself in his childhood home. His father sat in his favorite armchair, looking exactly as David remembered him. "Son," his father said, his voice warm and strong, "I'm proud of you. You've carried so much pain for so long. It's time to let it go." As the vision faded, David felt a sense of peace wash over him. He looked at the items spread before him, no longer seeing them as reminders of tragedy, but as keys to healing. The rain outside had stopped, and moonlight streamed through the window. David picked up his pen and began to write. The words flowed easily now, telling stories of loss, love, and redemption. As dawn broke, David sealed the manuscript in an envelope. He addressed it to a young writer he had read about, someone struggling with their own demons. Inside, along with the stories, he placed the key, the photograph, and the watch. David smiled as he dropped the package in the mail. The cycle would continue, the healing would spread. And somewhere, in a place between memory and dream, an old woman smiled too, knowing her work was done. As David returned to his apartment, he felt lighter than he had in years. The parcel of forgotten sorrows had become a gift of remembrance and healing. And in confronting his past, David had finally found the key to his future. In the bustling city of Millbrook, where secrets and lies were as common as morning coffee, lived a woman named Evelyn Marsh. She was unremarkable in many ways. Average height, mousy brown hair, a face that blended into crowds. But Evelyn harbored a terrible secret, one that set her apart from every other person in the world. It had begun on an ordinary Tuesday. Evelyn, running late for work, had told her boss she was stuck in traffic. A small lie, harmless really, or so she thought. Later that day, she learned that her coworker, seated just 2 cubicles away, had died suddenly of a heart attack. At first, Evelyn didn't make the connection. But then it happened again. She lied to her mother about visiting that weekend, and her elderly neighbor passed away in her sleep. A white lie to a friend about liking her new haircut. And the barista at her local coffee shop was found dead the next morning. As the pattern emerged, horror dawned on Evelyn. Every time she told a lie, no matter how small, someone near her died. The realization hit her like a physical blow, leaving her gasping for air in the middle of her living room. From that moment on, Evelyn's life changed dramatically. She became obsessed with telling the truth, no matter how painful or awkward. She avoided social situations, terrified that a polite fib might slip out and cost someone their life. Her friends and family noticed the change. Evelyn, once known for her tact and diplomacy, became brutally honest. She told her sister her new boyfriend was a loser. She informed her boss that his management style was ineffective. She even told a stranger on the street that their outfit was unflattering. People began to avoid her, put off by her harsh honesty. But Evelyn didn't care. All that mattered was preventing more deaths. She lived in constant fear, weighing every word before it left her lips. Weeks passed, and no one died. Evelyn began to relax, thinking perhaps the curse had lifted. But fate had other plans. One rainy evening, as Evelyn walked home from work, she saw a little girl standing alone on the street corner. The child was crying, clearly lost. Evelyn approached her, intending to help. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "Where are your parents?" The girl looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "I can't find my mommy," she sobbed. "Can you help me?" Evelyn's heart raced. She knew she should help, but what if the girl asked her something she couldn't answer truthfully? What if a lie slipped out and someone died? As she hesitated, a car sped by, splashing water onto the sidewalk. The little girl jumped, startled, and stepped back, right into the path of an oncoming bus. Without thinking, Evelyn lunged forward, grabbing the child and pulling her to safety. They fell to the ground, the bus missing them by inches. As they sat on the wet pavement, the little girl looked up at Evelyn with wide eyes. "Did you save me?" she asked in awe. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. She had saved the girl, yes, but admitting to being a hero felt dangerously close to bragging. What if the universe considered it a lie? In that moment, Evelyn made a choice. "No," she said firmly. "I just happened to bump into you. It was an accident." The girl frowned, confused. But before she could say anything more, a frantic woman appeared, calling out for her daughter. The child ran to her mother, leaving Evelyn alone on the sidewalk. Evelyn held her breath, waiting for news of another death. But as minutes ticked by, nothing happened. No sirens, no screams, no sudden commotion. For the first time in months, Evelyn had told a lie, and no one had died. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by confusion. What had changed? As she replayed the incident in her mind, understanding dawned. The lie she had told wasn't for personal gain or to avoid discomfort. It was a selfless lie, one that denied her own heroism. In the days that followed, Evelyn tested her theory carefully. She told small, selfless lies, complimenting a dejected coworker's work, telling a nervous friend they looked great before a date. Each time, she waited anxiously for news of a death, but none came. Slowly, Evelyn began to understand the nature of her curse. It wasn't lies themselves that triggered the deaths, but the intent behind them. Lies told out of kindness, to protect or uplift others, seemed to be exempt. This realization brought both relief and a new kind of burden. Evelyn now had to carefully consider not just the truth of her words, but the motivation behind them. Every interaction became a moral dilemma, a balancing act between honesty and compassion. As weeks turned to months, Evelyn learned to navigate her newfound power. She used her words carefully, always striving to help rather than harm. Her brutal honesty softened, replaced by a thoughtful kindness that drew people to her. But the weight of her secret never fully lifted. Evelyn knew that one careless word, one selfish lie, could still bring tragedy. She carried this knowledge with her always, a constant reminder of the power of words and the price of deception. In time, Evelyn came to see her curse as a strange kind of gift. It had taught her the value of truth, the importance of intention, and the delicate balance between honesty and kindness. She had become a guardian of sorts, using her words to protect and nurture those around her. And so, in a world where lies flowed as freely as air, Evelyn Marsh stood as a beacon of thoughtful truth. Her story serves as a chilling reminder that our words have power. Power to hurt, to heal, and sometimes to change the very fabric of reality itself. In the heart of a quaint, fog-shrouded town, nestled between a bakery and a bookstore, stood curiosities and relics. The antique shop was a treasure trove of the odd and forgotten, its shelves lined with objects that whispered of bygone eras and distant lands. At its helm was Elias Blackwood, a man as mysterious as the items he sold. Elias had inherited the shop from his eccentric uncle, along with its vast inventory of curiosities. For years, he had contentedly presided over his domain of dusty trinkets and tarnished treasures. But on a gloomy autumn evening, as rain pattered against the shop's windows, Elias made a discovery that would change everything. It was an unremarkable item at first glance, a small, silver hand mirror with an intricate floral design on its back. Elias had found it tucked away in a box of recent acquisitions, its origin a mystery. As he picked it up to examine it more closely, a chill ran down his spine. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and for a moment, Elias saw not his own reflection, but the face of a young woman. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the image vanished. Shaken, Elias set the mirror down. He told himself it was a trick of the light, a product of his overactive imagination. But deep down, he knew something extraordinary had occurred. Over the next few days, Elias found himself drawn to the mirror. He would catch glimpses of different faces, old, young, men, women, all wearing expressions of fear or anguish. It wasn't until a week later that he understood the true nature of the mirror. A customer had come into the shop, an elderly man looking for a gift for his granddaughter. As Elias wrapped the chosen item, the man suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. Despite Elias's frantic attempts to help, the man died there on the shop floor. In the chaos that followed, the ambulance, the police, the questions, Elias almost forgot about the mirror. But that night, as he was closing up the shop, he saw it again. The old man's face stared back at him from its silvery depths, confusion and fear etched into every line. Horror dawned on Elias as he realized the truth. The mirror didn't just show souls, it trapped them. Each face he had seen was a person who had died in the mirror's presence, their essence captured in its reflective surface. The discovery filled Elias with both fascination and dread. He knew he held something of immense power, something that defied the laws of nature. But what was he to do with it? At first, Elias considered destroying the mirror, but the thought of releasing all those trapped souls into the unknown held him back. What if destroying it damned them to an even worse fate? Then came the temptation to use the mirror's power. Elias found he could communicate with the trapped souls, gleaning knowledge from ages past. The possibilities seemed endless. He could solve historical mysteries, uncover lost secrets, maybe even help the police solve cold cases. But with each use of the mirror, Elias felt a darkness growing within him. The trapped souls begged for release, their anguish a constant weight on his conscience. He began to have nightmares, seeing himself reflected in the mirror, trapped for eternity. As word spread about the uncanny accuracy of Elias's historical insights, people began to take notice. Scholars sought his expertise, and a few keen-eyed investigators started asking questions about his sudden wealth of knowledge. One day, a woman entered the shop. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her movements heavy with grief. She approached Elias, holding out a photograph. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I heard you might be able to help. My daughter, she disappeared 5 years ago. We never found out what happened to her." Elias felt a chill as he recognized the young woman in the photo. He had seen her face in the mirror, one of the first he'd glimpsed. He knew with a sickening certainty that the girl was dead, her soul trapped in the silver surface. In that moment, Elias faced a terrible choice. He could tell this grieving mother the truth, give her the closure she desperately sought. But doing so would mean revealing the mirror's power, risking it falling into the wrong hands. Or he could lie, protect his secret, but deny a mother the knowledge of her daughter's fate. The weight of the decision pressed down on Elias. He had become a keeper of souls, a guardian of a power he never asked for. Each choice seemed fraught with moral peril. As he stood there, the mother's hopeful eyes fixed upon him, Elias realized the true curse of the mirror. It wasn't just the souls it trapped that were imprisoned. He too had become a prisoner of its power, forever burdened with the knowledge of life beyond death. In that moment, in the cluttered confines of his antique shop, Elias Blackwood understood that he had become something both more and less than human. He was now a soul merchant, trading in the currency of life and death, forever walking the thin line between morality and power. As rain continued to fall outside, casting long shadows through the shop windows, Elias made his choice. Whether for good or ill, the consequences would echo through time, much like the souls trapped within the mirror's silvery depths. The antique shop, once a haven of harmless curiosities, had become a battleground for the very essence of humanity. And Elias, its unlikely guardian, stood at the center of a storm that threatened to consume not just his life, but the lives and afterlives of countless others. As darkness settled over the quiet suburban home, Sarah cradled her infant son Michael in her arms. The soft glow of the nightlight cast eerie shadows on the walls. She gently placed the sleeping baby in his crib and tiptoed out of the nursery, closing the door behind her. Sarah sighed with relief. It had been a long day, and she was looking forward to some much-needed rest. As a single mother, every moment of peace was precious. She settled into her favorite armchair, ready to unwind with a book. The house was silent, save for the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Sarah's eyes began to droop, the words on the page blurring. Just as she was about to drift off, a faint sound caught her attention. She sat up, alert. It was coming from the baby monitor on the side table. At first, she thought it was just static, but as she listened closely, her blood ran cold. There were whispers, soft and indistinct, but undeniably there. Sarah's heart raced. She lived alone with Michael. There shouldn't be any other voices in the house. She grabbed the monitor, turning up the volume. The whispers grew clearer, but she still couldn't make out the words. With trembling hands, she set down the monitor and crept towards the nursery. The whispers continued, growing more urgent. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She reached for the doorknob, her palm slick with sweat. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the nightlight. Michael slept peacefully in his crib, unaware of his mother's distress. Sarah scanned the room, her eyes darting from corner to corner. Nothing seemed out of place. The window was closed, the closet door shut. Yet the whispers persisted, now seeming to come from all around her. She approached the crib, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. As she leaned over to check on Michael, the whispers suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. Sarah held her breath, straining to hear anything. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a single word, clear as day, came through the monitor. Sarah. She stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. How did they know her name? Who were they? What did they want? With shaking hands, she picked up Michael, holding him close. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Sarah's mind raced, trying to decide what to do. Should she call the police? Would they even believe her? As she stood there, paralyzed with indecision, the whispers returned. This time, they were louder, more insistent. Sarah could almost make out words, but they seemed to be in a language she didn't understand. She backed out of the nursery, clutching Michael to her chest. The whispers followed her, growing louder with each step. Sarah ran to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. She placed Michael on the bed, surrounding him with pillows. Then she grabbed her phone, ready to call for help. But as she dialed, the phone went dead. The screen flickered and went black. Panic rose in Sarah's throat. She was cut off, alone with whatever was in her house. The whispers continued, now seeming to come from inside the room. She spun around, searching for the source. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. Sarah could see her breath in the air. The whispers grew louder, each state more frantic. She could feel a presence in the room, unseen but undeniably there. Michael began to cry, his wails mixing with the otherworldly whispers. Sarah scooped him up, trying to comfort him while her own fear threatened to overwhelm her. The lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a moment. When they came back on, Sarah gasped. Written on the mirror, in what looked like frost, were two words: "He's ours." Sarah's legs gave out and she sank to the floor, still holding Michael. The baby's cries had stopped, replaced by an eerie coo. She looked down at him, and her blood ran cold. Michael's eyes, usually a soft blue, were now pitch black. The whispers reached a crescendo, filling the room with their unearthly sound. Sarah felt a tugging sensation, as if something was trying to pull Michael from her arms. She held on tighter, her maternal instinct giving her strength she didn't know she had. "No," she screamed, her voice raw with fear and determination. "You can't have him." As if in response to her defiance, the room began to shake. Pictures fell from the walls, shattering on the floor. The mirror cracked, splintering the ominous message. Sarah closed her eyes, holding Michael close and praying for it all to end. The whispers grew louder and louder until they were a deafening roar. And then, suddenly, silence. Sarah opened her eyes. The room was still, the damage from the supernatural assault clearly visible, but the oppressive presence was gone. Michael stirred in her arms, his eyes once again their normal blue. She let out a sob of relief, kissing her son's forehead. Whatever had tried to take him was gone, at least for now. But as Sarah looked around at her shattered room, she knew this was only the beginning. The whispers may have gone silent, but their echo remained. A chilling reminder that in the dark of night, not all is as it seems. And for Sarah and Michael, the boundary between their world and something far more sinister had been irreversibly blurred.
We hope you enjoyed this chilling tale. If it sent shivers down your spine, give us a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite part? Don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky and remember, sometimes the darkest shadows hide the most terrifying secret.